Greenspan said he didn't know when the bubble formulated and how they formulated. But how can he control the inflation? This is the same thing.
This is a very legitimate, very strong question. This is what Alan Greenspan said. If the markets can't recognize a bubble, how can I? How can my judgment be superior to that of a market? And he's right. Regulators can't predict any better than the markets. In fact, they are going to be less good at it than the markets.
I agree.
Okay? However, they have to recognize that markets create bubbles. And therefore, bubbles are harmful if they grow too big. And when they grow big, they can be recognized. And you have to recognize that the market participants, if they recognize a bubble, they are not going to correct it. They are going to play it until it collapses. Right. If I see a bubble, I buy. You see? So, therefore, to stop the bubble from going, there has to be a regulator that goes against the prevailing mood of the market. And when they do that, they can't judge it right.
So it's a regulation might indirectly create a bubble, like this subprime crisis, because no mortgage bank have good incentive to have right criteria for this lending. So that is, I mean, it's a regulator actually create a bubble, not cure bubble.
No, a regulator creates moral hazard. You are right.
Yeah, moral hazard, very important reason for bubble.
They create moral hazard. But if they didn't intervene, you see, markets would actually collapse. Therefore, they must intervene, right? They do intervene.
But market can create itself. No, market can correct itself.
Correct itself.
Yes.
The evidence shows that they can't. Without the regulators interfering, the financial system would collapse, would have collapsed long time ago. And it would continue to keep on collapsing. And that's why regulation has come into play. So I recognize your argument, which is the market fundamentalist argument, and I'm glad to hear it. However, the fact is that ever since you've had financial markets, you had financial crises. And each time there was a crisis, there was an examination of what went wrong, and there was some change or improvement in the regulatory climate and a regulatory mechanism. And that's how central banking developed. That's how the supervision of markets developed. So that's what we have been living with. And that has created moral hazard.
I think your ideas are great, but your argument is not very convincing.
No, why not? Why not?
I think it's really difficult to understand how market would inevitably create a collapse or bubble and collapse.
You don't.
I don't think that is.
So how do you explain that throughout history?
I think it's throughout our history, the most important phenomenon is always when government created too much money, we have a bubble. Then bubble burst. Then government come to rescue economy. That will make it worse. 1920s economic crisis, recession, was finished just within 1 year, without any government intervention.
In 1920s?
20. 1920 and 21, before you was born.
Yes. Yeah, but 1929?
That is because President Hoover intervened too much. And also...
No, come on. No, I mean, in 1929, the stock market collapsed.
Right.
1932, 33, the banking system collapsed, right? And you had Great Depression with very grave consequences. So if today, if the authorities did not replace the credit that has collapsed by government guarantees and increasing stimulus package and so on, we would go into Great Depression that would be as bad or worse than it was in the 1930s. So we don't want to repeat that. And therefore, we are bailing out the banks.
吉姆·罗杰斯，环游世界的投资大师，1970年与索罗斯共同创立量子基金，被称为对大势的把握无人能及。罗杰斯信奉投资不是投机，索罗斯与罗杰斯已经29年没有相见。沃伦·巴菲特有史以来最伟大的投资家，他倡导的长期价值投资理论风靡世界。同为世界最著名的3大投资家，但投资理念却大相径庭。索罗斯将如何评价罗杰斯与巴菲特呢？
As we know, Jim Rogers and Warren Buffett are both great investors. How do you compare with them?
With who?
With who?
Who?
James Rogers.
Oh, Jim Rogers.
Yeah, Jim Rogers. And Warren Buffett.
Yeah,
they are both very famous investors.
Yeah.
How do you compare with them in terms of investment philosophy?
Well, Jim Rogers used to work for me, and he was in fact a wonderful security analyst. He worked tremendously fast. He did the work of 8 people. So we had a very successful partnership, but he did not want another 7 people working next to him. So we had to part company. And since then, I don't think he has been such a great investor, but he was a very good analyst. His approach is very similar to mine, obviously. Warren Buffett is a very different approach.
What's the difference?
Because he looks for fundamental value. He follows the theory of Graham and Dodd. And he has been very successful his way. He does not recognize this reflexivity, and so our styles are very, very different. And it just shows you that there are different ways of approaching the market.